Meeting and surpassing all audience expectations every day. I'm Rush Limbaugh, America's real anchorman with talent on loan from God. Great to have you here. Our telephone number, if you want to be on the program, we're doing Open Line Friday on Tuesday today, which pretty means whatever you want to talk about. You can even switch subjects many times in the same call. 800-282-2882. And the email address, we check those too. The email address is lrushbo@eibnet.com. As you know, if you've been listening for any time, steady time recently, one of the things that I have remarked upon is a fairly recent quote-unquote discovery I've made about the left. And one of their techniques, I really think, and I really do mean this, I don't mean to be exaggerating this, when talking about the base Democrat or the base leftist voter, the most politically active, the people that troll websites and leave comments, the basically people that harass others in the political system, people whose they're not content to just live their lives. They're so miserable and deranged that they share it. And they try to spread that misery as far and wide as they can. I really think that what has happened is that the political agenda of the far left, as they constantly articulate it, has created some genuine insanity among their base voters. I mean, some real mental illness. Now, I think liberalism itself is a quasi-mental illness. But I think that the base of the left has been driven almost out of their minds by a constant barrage of the people they trust and believe in. Never-ending hate, never-ending anger. And people like, let's take the civil rights coalitions. I mean, they're out shouting, the Jacksons and the Sharptons, you name it, they're out shouting and they're claiming and threatening and all this. And they're fundraising. You know, they're doing it clearly to raise money and stay in positions of power. But their believers are taking it all to heart, and they're taken to the streets, and they are killing people. And they are engaging in acts of destruction disguised as the public protest. And I think that this is everywhere. I think college professors, depending on how angry they are when they teach, can end up creating genuine mental instability. I think one of the reasons why we're having such trouble, you and me, in dealing with this is we fashion ourselves as rational, and therefore we, in our own rationality, try to come up with rational ways to talk to them, interact with them, convince them they're wrong, or perhaps even persuade them, and it's a mistake. Rational and irrational don't mix. There isn't anything in common. We really have nothing in common. And I'm not talking about all of them. But it's a larger number than you would believe, and they're easily spotted. Many of them are anonymous, but you can spot them in the things they post on the internet, the protests they engage in, the action that they take. And I think that the leadership of the left, from college professors to elected officials to you name it, is creating a genuine mental instability among their followers. They're creating anger and rage, and they're doing it every day. They never let up. Every day, the people in charge of the left and its agenda are just enraged at everything. They're livid. They're never happy. They never smile. Even leftist comedians now are just livid and filled with rage. And I'm telling you, it has had a deleterious effect on followers and people that end up being true believers. Like I say, Sharpton and Jackson, they're who they are. I mean, they're out there doing what they do, and Sharpton will go out and say, "Oh, we might have knocked down to that canvas by that grand jury, but we're not going to stay on the mat. We're going to get up. Yeah, we're going to not cut those gloves off. We're going to." Well, that is heard by he's just fundraising. He's just rabble-rousing, keeping his supporters loyal, but they hear it. Obama says things like, they bring a knife to a fight, we bring a gun. People hear this stuff, and they consider it a license. And I'm not absolving the leaders of any responsibility for it. I am exempting them from it in this, and I could be wrong about that. I think they have just as much rage, but I think they're users. And I think they're creating this rage out there on purpose to create this army, constant chaos, constant crisis, one after another. We can't even take a breath. Because the time we take a breath, there's something new that's popped up that we can't understand. It doesn't make any sense. Nobody stands up against it. Everybody wants to appease it. And we feel like they're losing control of everything. I think it's being done on purpose. And it really is a disservice to people. We're creating in the country the leftist side of the population. I tell you, you sit down and actually talk to some of these people, and it is just impossible. And you hear it. New York Times wanting war crimes charges against Dick Cheney. War, and they're dead serious about. Okay, you have a reader of the New York Times, somebody that's already mentally deranged reading that. All they got to do is see the magic word Halliburton, and they are loaded for bear. And these people are everywhere, folks. They've taken over the university. They've taken over academies. They're in the media. And I thought of all this with this next story that I found on campus reform. And this is another one of these great young conservative websites that is springing up. It's a new generation of alternate media. Young people who have decided to chronicle some of the outrages on campus, which is brand new. It used to not, everything happened there was one way, one-sided. Did you know that at Stanford University they have a dean for religious life? At Stanford University, they have a law school dean, they have a dean of students, they have a dean of this. They have a dean for religious life. Okay, fine and dandy. Now, what got me on this? We had a couple of callers yesterday who were totally pessimistic. They expressed their sorrow and concern. They think that we've gone so far down that there's no saving the country. And by that they meant as it was. Everybody knows there's always going to be an America, but will there be an America of the founding with those kinds of values? There's a great story in the Wall Street Journal that's the counterbalance to this. I think his name is Dan Stevens, and he believes that we are actually not in bad shape at all, and that we're in great shape, and he tries to explain why, and I'll get to that here before the program ends, because it'd be a great counterbalance to this story in campus reform. Anyway, the dean for religious life is named Jane Shaw, the very Reverend Jane Shaw. I have her picture here, and she looks like a dean of religious life. And she believes that churches are focusing too much on religion. And they need to change their focus to art. She's the dean for religious life at Stanford. In a recent interview, she said she's not very churchy as a person, yet somehow she qualified as the dean for religious life. She advocated that the church welcome people more without trying to convert them. And the way to do that is just drop all this religion all the time. It's not necessary to do religion all the time in the church. The church can do art. The church can do global warming. The church can alert people to climate change. The church can do a lot of public good if it would just drop all the religion. What does it even mean? Not necessary to do religion. What do you mean do religion? What does that even mean? Stop praying? Stop singing? Stop doing sermons? Stop reading the Bible? What does it mean? Oh, by the way, she happens to be an LGBT activist and a lesbian. And she's the dean of religious life. Now, it's stories like this, I'm sure, that convince the two callers I talked about yesterday that they're right, that we are so screwed, that there's no coming back with this kind of infiltration by these mentally ill people who should be offering balance. You know, the academy's always been a place of openness, and we're told openness of ideas and intellectual rigor, and there's none of that going on, or very little of it anymore. It's indoctrination, even at the institutions of higher learning. She's also a Brit. I listened to a little bit. It's hard to hear. She has an accent, obviously, but even she doesn't seem to have any depth at all. She seems like a totally surface individual. But how does somebody like this, and at Stanford, this is no slouch place, how does somebody like this end up in a position called a dean for religious life? Try this as a pull quote. I think the great crisis of our day is climate change and the environment. Now, to me, this is proof of someone who's not intellectual. She is a priest, by the way. She's a priest from Harvard and Oxford, and this is what she thinks is the biggest crisis of the day? Climate change and the environment? Well, why does she think that? Because she knows what they are tickets to. If you gain control of people and you convince them that religion, the religion of God, needs to take a back seat because these churches are too religious and start getting into art, what does that mean? Well, global warming and climate change. You then convert these people to believing in the earth and the environment as religion. And then it becomes inarguable. Once you invest your faith in the religion of God, outside the religion of God, make it the religion of climate change, global warming of the earth, well, then you can't be converted. It's your religion. It's offensive for anybody to even try. It's your religion. It's your faith. Nobody can argue with your faith. So I rather hope that more people would take that seriously and begin to think and reflect on what they are doing with their own lives and how they can bring some pressure to bear to change things. This woman ordained as a priest at the Church of England, which is the equivalent of the Episcopal Church in the United States. And to me, this is a classic illustration of how this pollution, or this perversion of our great institutions is taking place with utter, sheer nonsense. And parents are spending whatever it costs, $20,000 a semester or year to send their kids to this place to be taught this gunk. We got to get the religion out of our churches. That's the problem. There's just too much religion going on in there, and we need to stop it. We need to replace the religion with social justice in churches. Now, you can say, Rush, come on, this is a one-off. This is a coup. No, see, we used to say that about these people 20 years ago. I'll admit, running into stories like this 20 years ago, we'd laugh about it, and we would immediately dismiss it as quackery and kookery. And here it is 20 years later, and they have made more inroads into the mainstream than anybody ever thought. And one of the reasons why is everybody thought it was so insane, so stupid, so silly that all we did was laugh at it. But here they are. And I think it's just more evidence and another example of what we're actually dealing with out there. And I guarantee you, this woman is the dean of religious life. You think there's probably not some anger in the way she tries to reach people? Anger about what they arrived at school believing and how they were wrong and how they were being propagandized by their parents and whatever. Just a very unfortunate thing. And it's all these people making this happen are the epitome of unhappiness in their personal life. Misery, miserable. No matter what they get, they're never happy. No matter how much they get, no matter how much they win, it never makes them happy, which keeps them constantly demanding more. And they portray themselves as victims, which means we can't oppose it. That makes us mean-spirited and judgmental. They cast themselves as minorities. Same thing. And so the slow erosion of what we all believe in continues, and the attempted massive takeover and destroying it also goes on at the same time. But it's this time of year that my faith in all of this stuff eventually bottoming out and blowing up is at its highest. And I wish I could tell you why. It's not something tangible that I can point to and say this, and this are what give me confidence. There are those things, obviously, but many of them are personal. And I would be foolish to deny that they are positive for me, but I do try to imagine how they are positive for the country at large. And I would love to be able to tell you how. I'd love to be able to give you tangible things that you could point to, you could grab onto as evidence that I think this stuff is going to eventually implode on itself. Unfortunately, I can't. I can just share with you the idea and the firm belief that I do think these people are ultimately going to lose. Don't know when, and we're going to be shocked a lot more in the future at apparent signs. And by the way, I'm not saying don't do anything to stop it. There's nothing automatic. I don't think that just the forces of good are going to triumph one day. But I do think they are. Always have. Got to take a break now. We'll come back and continue with more after this. Don't go away.